عرفتي انا ما فرحانش بالدنيا هذه كلنا غير يوصلوا الدراري يقراو والله ما زيد لك عندها هديه بيسك بصح ما كاينش يرحم والديك عليا شنو نديرو شويه الحياه هذه كل شويه نديرو نوض نخدم نروح يجي الخدمه شاتي انا في الخدمه نقرب يسيلوا عليا بكينا حبست تخدم العبد في حين شويه تخدم المبغوتين ما كاينش الحنان هذا
Contemporary women of color and third world women's critique of feminist universalism central the claim that the intersection of race, class, sexuality, and gender exceeds the categories of modernity. If women in black are terms of homogeneous, separable, atomic categories, then their intersection shows us the absence of black women rather than their presence. So to see not white women is to exceed the categorical logic. I get incredibly angry when people talk to me about intersectionality of feminism, about race, about womanhood. I feel like people learn to frame things in nice and sophisticated words for essays and class materials so it could fit a nicely constructed essay structure that's going to solve gender-based discrimination. I feel like we all collectively adhere to categories that were constructed coercively against our will to rationalize the masquerade of the colonizer's reality and forget that there is actually people, feelings, history, complexity, depth, sufferance, joy, love, anger, stories behind words that were turned empty. As if the reality of colonial power and what justice looks like for me could ever coexist and are inherently antagonistic, contradictory, and adverse. As if all of this was behind us, it was a mistake made long ago and I really shouldn't be holding grudges. And it's not that deep. And I really, really wish it wasn't that deep because indeed, it makes me sick. It takes up so much place in my mind. I can't help but notice, I can't help but compare, oppose, deconstruct, reconstruct, label, question. And there's no conclusion because you can't sum up forces that are incapable of coexisting together. There's no peaceful locus for me to occupy. I'm lucky because I have the privilege of being aware. I don't have to only feel it and let it unconsciously inhabit me and internalize it and let it consume me from the inside, but I get to comprehend it. I get the privilege of reading about it. I get the privilege of being angry. I get the privilege of being confident and not letting it completely transform my self-perception. I get to comprehend that the white man's modernity is constructed. I'm aware that there is another reality, one that has survived the violence and genocidal attempts. Decolonial feminism is about the search for social organization from which people have resisted capitalist modernity, spaces in tension with its logic. I get the privilege to have experienced a cosmological, ecological, economic, spiritual, non-modern. I live within my people, on our lands, on our terms. I grew up associating independence and power with elderly women. My grandmother used to be the embodiment of what freedom looks like when I was a child. If women in black are terms of homogeneous, atomic, separable categories, then their intersection shows us the absence of black women rather than their presence. So to see non-white women is to exceed the categorical logic. I didn't have to read the census more than once to understand it. As a woman of color, it's your reality to not be seen, to be outside of the category of normality. You're other than. I didn't have to read the census more than once to understand. As a woman of color, it's your reality to not be seen, to be outside of the category of normality. You're other than. You are the deviation, the irregularity, the anomaly. You're not expected to prevail on your own. You can't stand as an atomic being that exists sovereignly. You have to be perceived and understood from the perspective of what the ontological separation that defines modernity permits. You basically have to understand yourself based on where you diverge from the categorical separation of things. Basically, you have to understand yourself based on where you are not a white girl or a white man, basically. We're gonna get to that. It is something that you feel, something that takes over your whole entire relation to yourself and to others. You're coercively pushed to construct a reality where you are the deviation. And you'll have no choice but to adapt as long as you live in the white man's world. Sometimes you don't need words or logic to understand things. You simply sense it. I sense it in the way I perceive myself. I sense it in the way I perceive others, and not just women. I'm constantly comprehending things in a multiplicity, at different levels, with layers, with detailing, with perspective that are not necessarily mine because it's not my world to begin with. I don't have the privilege of being the default setting. I don't have the privilege of being docile and careless. I don't have the privilege to be naive and ignorant, basically. It's like your whole senses are constantly on alert. You always have to be one step ahead because you will stumble. You don't know what's coming up, but you know it's not going to be tailor-made for you, so you better be prepared. I'm aware that there's another reality, one that has survived the violence and the genocidal attempts. Modernity can be defined as a way of organizing reality in homogeneous, separable categories. The non-modern is subordinated to the modern. It robs us of coevalence. Denial is decoloniality. It is the constructive of modernity. The reality is not only constructed, but maintained through the same oppression, coercion, and violence that first initiated it. It's not a passive reality, it's one that needs to be reinforced and pushed through the same horrendous mechanism that pushed its reification. Modernity attempts to control by creating the false conception that this is the way things should be, this is the way things has been, and before that there were absolutely nothing. Nothing but the pre-modern. It attempts an erasure, a denial of the complexity of the collision between two systems of power. It makes you believe that the white man created you, and before that, your ancestors has been waiting there without agency, waiting for the civilizing mission to fabricate their identity as subordinates and subjectify them. Civilization doesn't need a world to be formed, a world of emptiness, of a world of empty minds, of evolving animals. Colonization is the construction of the colonized from the dehumanizing perspective. It is the redefinition of a category of being that are inherently above and naturally available for subjectification. It is the creation and imposition of an intersubjective reality that denies other possibilities and refuses to acknowledge the existence of what was there before the intrusion. It denies the complex cultural, political, economic, and religious beings that are native to the world they trespass. The construction of the colonized is the full reduction of them to less than human, primitive, satanically possessed, infantile, aggressively sexual. The civilizing mission is the colonization of the minds, of memory. It is the distortion of people's senses of self and intersubjective realities, their relation to the spirit world, land, every fabric of their conception of reality, identity, social, ecological, and cosmological organization. The colonial difference is the space where the colonial power is enacted. The central dichotomy of colonial modernity resides in the difference between the human and the non-human. In service of the white man, the distinction between the colonized and the colonizer resides in the fact that the white man gets to be human, and the colonized is deprived from that quality. You are less than human. You are an animal, savage, uncontrollably sexual and wild. You're not hurting a being that is in any way comparable or similar to you. You're hurting this non-human creature. Seeing them as lacking from the perspective of the civilizing mission allows a voluntary detachment from any form of mankind values. A savagery that takes root in ruthlessness and malice. The bourgeois European colonial modern man becomes an agent fit for rule, public life, and civilization. He's perfectly conforming to the structures and institutions he created, and he's perfectly fitted to be on top of the hierarchies he created and imposed. The colonial bourgeois white woman was not really understood as his complement, but rather a whole entire category. A whole different category, separable category. She's the inversion of the perfect human, the man. She's still human. Her role is to perpetuate the race through her sexual purity. Her passivity is desirable. She's in service of the white man that gives her her superiority. The white colonial women are guardians of the purity of the race. They ensure the perpetuation of the race. They ensure the perpetuation of the hygiene of the race. Submissive, compliant, docile, receptive. White women get to have the virtue of innocence, cleanness, chastity, integrity. In contrast, the woman of color, the non-human, the non-gendered, colonized, is uncontrollably sexual. Her body is to be used. She is untamed and sinful. Her attractiveness and attributes are dangerous. If white women are understood as lacking because they differ from the human by excellence, the men, the colonized women are understood as lacking because she's seen as a non-human, as not woman. Because women are the inversion of men, and men are human, and colonized are not human. If that makes sense. The colonized female is not a woman. She's loud, bossy, indelicate, violent, vicious, primitive and tame, domineering, tyrannical, dangerous. The coloniality of gender creates this empty category of colonized women because by definition, no woman is colonized and no colonized is women. Empty category. The colonized woman is at the bottom of the hierarchical dichotomies that are central to modernity. The coloniality of gender, which is the intersection of gender, race, class, is central to the construct of capitalist world system of power. The capitalist system of power is anchored in colonization. They go hand in hand, or rather, colonization carries capitalism on its back. I get so angry when people question why I would be anti-capitalist. I could genuinely sense the confusion in their eyes, a confusion that screams, "It's so natural for me to exploit and subjectify others. Why would you ever be furious about this?" I mean, it's working, it's efficient, it's human nature to exploit others, to be on top, isn't it? There's a very important historical understanding of the inseparability of racialization and capitalist exploitation. Coloniality is a process of active reduction of people. It is a process of dehumanizing and reduction of people. The dehumanization benefits the white man for classification, the classification of human beings in terms of coloniality of power, and gender, where gender is understood only in terms of access to women's bodies. To perceive coloniality is to be aware, conscious, and acknowledge the subjectivity and the intersubjectivity that allows the construction of modernity. To perceive coloniality is to understand and acknowledge that the subjectivity and intersubjectivity on which modernity is made is built upon a degradation that gives us to rendition of life and a being rendered by them, the colonized. The sole possibility of being is by inhabiting the fracture, the one caused by coloniality. Coloniality inhabits every aspect of being. It creates a polarized reality where you exist in a contradictory multiplicity. The only possible way we can exist as colonized, living in a world that is built upon our in-question subjectification, is by inhabiting the fracture, where sense is contradictory, and from this contradiction, a contradiction that is made normal and natural, a new sense is created anew. They look at you crazy when you try to explain that, as if the antithetical reality that fabricates your confusion isn't essential to the system of power that ensure their privilege. Modernity will never allow equality. Modernity is the imbalance. Decolonial feminism is a way of understanding the oppression of women through a process of racialization, exploitation, capitalist exploitation, colonization, and heterosexuality. It divests away from perceiving the colonized as simply imagined and fabricated by the colonizer and coloniality in accordance with the colonial depiction and structures of capitalist colonial project, but as a being who perceives doubly and relates doubly. A locus that is constructed doubly and where the sides of the locus are in tension. Therefore, resistance isn't really the end goal of political struggle, it is the possibility of. It expresses itself infrapolitically, not in the politics of the public. The very oppressive system that defines modernity makes sure to deny legitimacy, authority, voice, sense, and visibility to the colonized. The politics of resistance, the ones toward liberation, begin with a turn inward. The infra-political achievement is moving away from what the hegemon makes us be. Resistance happens between subject in intersubjective collaboration and conflict where fully informed members of indigenous communities take up, respond, resist, accommodate to hostile invaders who intend to dispossess and dehumanize them. In contrast with women of color feminism, decolonial feminism develops an understanding of oppression from and at the colonial difference with a strong emphasis on the ground and historical intricate intersubjectivity. It is the active subjectivity of the colonized against the colonial invasion of self in community from the inhabitation of that self. It begins with seeing the colonial difference and resisting the epistemological, ingrained subconscious habits of erasing and dismissing it. Working toward decolonial feminism is learning about each other as resistance to coloniality without having to be enrolled in its vicious grip.